I'm Matt Mitchell with Oasis Medical Center, and we are going to continue with our series. We are calling this Help for Parents, Navigating Middle School. And so in this video, we're going to be talking about the issue that many of our middle school students are dealing with. And we're going to be talking about this issue of sexting and pornography. 22% of teen girls say they have posted nude or semi-nude photos or videos of themselves online. Now, these are some quotes that we've also received from local students. Again, there's a 7th grade girl that says, boys have requested nudes. A 7th grade girl says, I have sent nudes. There's another one from another 7th grade girl. She says, boys ask me to have sex with them. I say no, but they won't leave me alone about it. Now, to me, that is amazing that this is happening in the 7th grade. I would not be surprised, for high school, but that this is happening in middle school is very disturbing. Is it surprising to any of you?
I'm broken about it, but not surprised by it.
Right.
Now I've even seen it a little younger than middle school, unfortunately.
So while we're gearing these videos to help parents of middle school students, would you all agree that there are students who are even younger who are dealing with these same issues?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Unfortunately, in the elementary setting, I'm seeing these things in as young as 3rd and 4th, 5th grade.
It's another quote, but this girl is another 7th grade girl. She says, a boy said to me he would cut himself or kill himself if I didn't send him these types of photos. So even bringing in the bullying element into that. Do you think, now some of these where in a situation like that, there's obviously, it's like a bullying issue, but a lot of students are doing this voluntarily, correct? Do you think they're aware of the ramifications of these decisions?
I don't know that children this age can be aware of the ramifications. Just brain development, and trust me, I'm not a neuroscientist, but just the brain development, what children are able and ready to process at those ages. I don't know that they can fully think through all of these things. I mean, I'm an adult, and it's hard for me to think through some of these things sometimes because the effects are far-reaching, and they continue to go beyond and beyond and beyond what we first see can happen.
And brain development is a significant issue because our brains are not fully developed until age 25 or sometimes 27, and that means that we are not necessarily making the best decisions as kids, and especially even more so as a middle school student. What do you think about when you see kids as middle school students or even maybe elementary school students that have their own phones and access to internet 24/7?
I think scary, honestly, because it's in most things. Cell phones have so many great uses. They're good for so many different things. At the same time, it's scary to think about what all they can get, what all they can obtain from that cell phone in a matter of seconds. Pornography, sexual immorality has been something that's been going on long before today. All through Scripture, we find in Corinthians and Timothy that it says flee sexual immorality or flee youthful lust, the idea of running away from that sin. So it's been something that we've been struggling with for a long time. But now it's just so much easier to get. There's no longer, like my generation, if you were going to get something like that, you had to go to a store to get it, and you had to crawl through some hoops to obtain sexual images or whatever. And now they don't have to do that anymore. And then you mentioned a few moments ago about the sending pictures. What I've seen more of is the quote unquote boyfriend that says, hey, if you love me, if you really care about me, then you'll do this. And that young man or young boy doesn't necessarily matter. They're not really caring about it. They're wanting to get it for the purpose of distribution. And when you ask the question, do they really understand the ramifications of what's going on? I don't really think that they do, because if they did, they would understand that could be felony.
Right.
Distribution of child pornography is a felony, and so there's a lot of things, not just a social aspect of it, and not just the ridicule and the laughter and things like that, of the bullying side of it, but it's a serious issue when it comes to that they have given somebody who is under the age of 18, they've given their pictures or sent their pictures out to their friends, their buddies that all along they were just trying to do use the I love you just to get that photo so they could do that.
You've mentioned that it's this sexting thing is really like in their mind, a form of flirting. That's the way they see this.
Our culture has become so sexualized that I think that is how it's seen a lot of times. I think it is seen as flirting. I think it is seen as something that the culture tells them is normal. And the reality is it's detrimental. It's detrimental to them and to their mental state. And it doesn't always just happen where boys are asking girls. I see it happening the opposite way as well. There's a curiosity about things that are unknown, and they're using this to get information, thinking that it's all in private and it's all personal. But the reality is, once those images are put out there, they can be accessed by almost, depending on how they're put out there, they can be accessed by an infinite number of people.
And they're even, so they've put a lot of trust in the person that they have sent this picture to. And that may be a situation where, you have a couple, they're dating, and they've put that confidence that they would not share it. But then when they break up, then there's obviously that potential that they would do that just to harm the other person. And so, but like you said, there's no way to take it back.
And unfortunately, a student's phone, your child's phone, might not just stay with your child. Their friends might get a hold of it, and they might use that. They might send that. They might think it's funny.
Right.
And they might, there again, not realize the ramifications of that, because their brain is not fully developed to think a week down the road, tomorrow even. So it's really important to have those conversations with your child, and the longer you can wait to give them a phone, the better.
I hear the phrase a lot, we exposed her. And it's almost as if it's a fun game to get those photos so that they can expose that young lady, or we exposed him. It has become so, like what she had mentioned, it just becomes so normal that it's almost now a game to expose somebody that you want to bring down, or you want to do something to. So we do whatever it takes to get that so that we can ultimately hurt that individual.
Sometimes it's a matter of showing off. They're so proud of that hot new girl that goes to another school that nobody else knows, and they're just going to show their buddies. And then it turns into the exact same kind of situation. There's a lot of different ways that this can play out, and none of them are good.
Right.
And then they're becoming desensitized to it all.
And, something that you said was, back in years ago, let's even just 80s, 90s, but a person who wanted to obtain pornography would have to make a lot of effort to find it, especially in Corinth. And now you would have to make effort not to see it. So it's like it's flipped. I mean, things can pop up on your screen that you're not even searching for, and so you have to make the effort not to see pornography, which means that that could be a very dangerous situation for a developing brain of a young person, male or female. But to be exposed to that at an early age, I mean, it's with anything else that is addictive, like pornography is. The earlier you're exposed to it, the greater chance that you're going to develop a problem with that, like addiction. So that really brings a lot of responsibility back to the parents, does it not?
Yes.
Yes, it does. And one thing, when you said that, children are naturally curious.
Right.
Which, we've mentioned, but because they're naturally curious, it's hard to turn away, even for the child who's in a family who's talked to them possibly about the dangers that they're going to see online. It's one of those things they're curious about. So the more you talk about it, the more likely they are to cut it off and to go the other way, to let the parent know. I think as far as the parents go, the parents need to say, not if you see this, but when you see this, then you will see it maybe multiple times today, this week. Let me know. There needs to be all sorts of protections on the computer, all sorts of safety measures taken. And you can't do too much. And you need to go back and double check those because kids can work around those.
Right.
And
The kids are tech savvy.
Yeah.
Oftentimes much more than we are.
And maybe it wasn't your child that went around that because there are other children in and out of the home, maybe who have use of your child's phone. So maybe it wasn't your child, but you got to keep those lines of communication open, double check, because children will act their age.
Right. And they may not be going around it to get to pornography.
No.
They may be going around it to get to that latest game so they can partner with their buddies and play online. But what they do in taking some of those roundabouts and those shortcuts is they open themselves again to being exposed to these things. All children can be exposed and being exposed. And a lot of parents say, well, I know it's out there. There's nothing I can do about it. So they just kind of let it go in the wind. But what Miss Tracy said, having those constant communications and not necessarily the sit down lectures, though those can be effective sometimes, but not necessarily that. Just kind of as you go, like we talked about with the bullying, as you go, you want to continually talk. And every time something of a sexual nature comes up, don't shy away from it as a parent. It's going to be uncomfortable for you, most likely. It's going to be uncomfortable for your children. But if you don't talk to them about it, somebody will.
Right. I'm thinking about the 7th grade girl that says, these boys keep asking me to have sex. I keep saying no. Then they won't leave me alone about it. So, again, from a parent's perspective, it would be much better for us to have these conversations with our boys and girls before one of these guys has that conversation.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And to ask your child, because even in a therapeutic setting, most of the children I see, middle school, teens, older teens, even young adults, they're not going to bring it up. So I have to bring it up, and I might bring it up different ways. I might allude to things. What are you seeing or whatever. And they usually will let me know, well, this is out there, or that's out there. And sometimes I have found an addiction where the parent might have been clueless to that just by asking, are you seeing anything that's inappropriate?
Right.
So parents need to ask.
Are you, have you seen or dealt with students who are struggling with pornography?
Yes, I have, and I would just kind of add some thought to this is this struggle or addiction or whatever wording you want to use there for students. It starts in most cases with that small flame, that small spark, before it ever becomes a forest fire. And oftentimes, what I've seen is it's through social media. You see certain images, and you think, well, what's the next step, or what's under that, or whatever. And so our culture, our world has done such a phenomenal job on selling that. And so, that student may be trying to be innocent, and he or she, they may be trying to do right, and they may try, and that, that night they're just going through their Instagram account, and then boom, it hits them out of nowhere, and the way Satan oftentimes does with things, and they're not prepared for that moment. And I think that's why it's so important for parents to understand that is going to happen. Like, be prepared for it. So you need some guidelines, and you need some guarding of the phone or the computer, and you need some time where maybe the only time they use that is when they're sitting in the living room. That they don't go back to their bedroom with it, because Satan will easily use those things to spark interest, like you said, right, or to spark that mindset. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this or whatever. And so now I take it to the next level. So now I do this, or I Google search this, or I whatever that looks like, because of an image or because of something, or because my buddies, it's become the norm. Hey, everybody's doing it. I say that everybody's doing it, so I want to know. I want to understand. I don't want to be sitting around the lunchroom table tomorrow at school and not know what they're talking about. And so I'm going to search that. And that phone, that whatever device that you have, is an easy access point for them to do that at any time whatsoever.
Yeah. And they are sitting around at school talking about these things. I'm very blessed. I know I haven't had any issues at school that I've had to deal with, but I have had conversations that have been happening about things that happen with technology outside of school. And those are a constant just influx. What the kids are accessing on those phones, those devices, a tablet, a laptop, all of that. It's coming in. It comes into the schools. I hear the talk about it. I know it's there. It's not something that I'm necessarily having to deal with in the school itself, but I know without a doubt it's something that my students are having to deal with.
It's not an isolated incident.
I would go so far to say it's not if my child is going to deal with this, struggle with it. It's when my child is going to deal or struggle or be.
Tracy, you have mentioned, what's the earliest age that you have seen a child dealing with or be negatively affected by pornography?
First grade.
First grade.
Mm-hmm.
Already been exposed to it to the point where it's created a problem.
That it's a compulsion.
To go back and watch that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thinking about setting these guardrails and these boundaries as parents, and with access to a phone, you mentioned a good idea is to put that computer in a kind of like a public place where everybody can see what's on that screen. I've heard some other parents mention they don't let their child take those phones to the bedroom. Like there's a place where they basically put those phones, and they don't have access to in the privacy of their bedroom go to the internet 24/7.
Right. I think that's a good practice. Any of us are less likely to do things that we see as being problematic, regardless of what it may be, if we're in a public location.
Right.
And that's a way just to help our kids be constantly mindful of what they're doing, because a lot of times they do fall down the rabbit hole, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's one click and it leads to this, and that curiosity leads to this, and before they know it, they're in a place where they didn't intend to be, possibly. But if they're in an environment when mom and dad could walk by at any time, when that tattletale little sister could walk by any time, they're much less likely to do some of this clickbait, to take some of those baits that have been dangled in front of them on the internet.
Right.
I'm thinking about the training that you mentioned going into a game, is that there are certain things that are going to happen, and there's scenarios that your players are going to face, so you train them to deal with them ahead of time. And even so, I've got two boys that like baseball, and on the baseball field, there's the coach might yell, "We got a runner at first. Where's the play?" And every kid out there yells, "The play's at second." Because they've been trained, and they don't even have to think about it. It's just instinctive. They know what they're going to do in that situation because they've been trained over and over and over. So when the runners, we got a runner on first, plays at second. So what if we took that kind of intentional mindset to dealing with these issues? Because like all of you have said, it's not if our kids are exposed to pornography or even sexting, it's when. And so when they are, what do you do? And so one thing that that I've tried to do, what my wife and I we've tried to do, is that telling the boys, when you see something like this, turn away from it, and then come tell us. I mean, that's just for simple starters, turn away and then come tell us where you saw it, so we can then take some action to keep you from seeing more of it. And so we have had these discussions. We'll see, we'll see if they follow that, but we at least we want to make sure that we've done our best to try to prepare them for those situations.
And I think that's key in setting those boundaries, because when you use the baseball analogy, we've all probably watched the T-ball game where the ball goes up in the air and every kid runs all to that one spot to try to get the ball because they don't understand their responsibility. They don't know where they're supposed to be. They don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't really have that mindset yet. And I think when you set those boundaries, one of the key things it does is it also teaches that student some responsibility. They know where they're supposed to be. They know what they're supposed to be doing. When the ball's thrown, there's somewhere where they're supposed to be. There's an action that they're supposed to take. Just like what you said with your boys, that at the moment that they see that, there's some responsibility that goes along with that. And I also think boundaries for students show them that there's consequences for their actions. If they're not where they're supposed to be, if they're not where they're, then there's consequences for that. And that consequence may be the discipline of mom and dad, but the consequence also, and this is a key for good parenting, is the consequences could be the felony charge for sending pictures. Right. The consequence could be, it may be out of mom and dad's hands because they've taken it too far, or the consequences may be something long-lasting that affects them in their marriage later on. It may be something that affects them emotionally, and it may be something that affects them spiritually. Whatever that looks, that there's consequences to that. So I think setting boundaries are setting guidelines, maybe we should say, for students. It's bigger than just helping them get away from pornography, but it's in every aspect of life, so that it's creating healthy families, healthy parenting, so that they know, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do. If I'm a second baseman, I know I'm supposed to cover the bag if that runner's leaving first, or whatever that is. So I know that if the throw comes to me, I'm ready. That's my responsibility. And if I'm not there where I'm supposed to be, there's a consequence for that action. And so with that, I hate to keep using coaching analogies here, but with that, there's some thought there that when we set boundaries, when we limit them, when we show them, the effects, and not just, hey, don't do, but when we're doing right, when we're setting those boundaries, then I think it provides a good playing field for that student to deal with that once they are, not if, but when they're confronted with whatever that is when it comes to pornography or sex.
And I've always said, I've always said that if you don't set boundaries, how's your child ever going to know you care? Mm-hmm. They're never going to know. They're going to grow up, they're going to look back and realize, if my parents didn't set a boundary, did they care for me? Mm-hmm. And so the earlier you set a boundary with the phone, boundaries with the phone, social media, and all aspects of that, they're going to get it. And it's okay to go ahead and up front set those boundaries, not once something's happened. Oh, what do we do now? To go ahead, let your child know you're well aware of the things that could happen, and then go ahead and do a contract. If you do this, then this is what happens. To let them know there are built-in consequences for it. And they're going to take that personally. They might not understand the big picture and what could happen, but if they understand, hey, this could affect me, this could affect my activities, this could affect me not getting my phone, they might think twice before they go to the wrong thing, or before they just keep on and not letting you know. So.
Yeah. And some of the consequences, like the way it may affect their marriage in the future or whatnot, those are bigger things than they can think about. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't still tell them. Yeah. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't still know. Because if they hear it often enough, they hear it consistently over the course of their life, as their brains do develop, things are going to start clicking. It's going to start making sense. So the fact that and you deliver the message differently to children who are younger as opposed to those who are older. With my 16-year-old, I may be able to talk to him now about how things he does now will impact his marriage, because he's getting older and he's able to understand some of those things. When he was 6 and 7 and 8, I would tell him, it's going to make you think things about people that may or may not be true, and you want to always be able to think about what's true. So you have to protect what you're putting in your brain so it comes out. The message is the same, the impact is the same, but you just talk to a kid on their level about it. But to know what level they're on, you have to be talking to them consistently, and you have to be listening to them. But it's never too early to start telling them those big things, even if their brain's not ready to process that yet.
Because like you said, with how do we learn anyway? By repetition. So the more you hear it, the more you're liable to understand it.
Absolutely.
I want to tap into something that you said. You were talking about the boundaries, and that when we are willing to set the boundaries, that actually shows that we care. that just reminded me of, I'm also a counselor, and I worked for some time in an alcohol and drug rehab. And so there was just a discussion one day about these boundaries, and every person in that room said they wish their parents had set boundaries for them. I mean, it was a question, and everybody raised their hand. They said, "I wish," and they acknowledged, as adults, I would have resisted that. I would have bucked against that. But I wish they had set the boundaries for me at an earlier age. And that's coming from a room full of people in an alcohol and drug rehab as adults. So I think that is so important, what you said about us as parents being willing to set those boundaries. Are they going to push those boundaries? Yes, but our responsibility as parents is to go ahead and set those boundaries.
Yes.
Set that line, set your expectations, communicate them, make them clear, and then be consistent in holding that. And you're teaching your kids a whole lot about how to live life, what to expect from themselves, and then how to stay consistent even through the hard times. That in itself is a beautiful life lesson, and it applies to this topic that we're discussing today, but it applies to a whole lot of other things as well.
Yes.
I think a good reminder is found in Galatians chapter 6, verse 7, where it talks about how God's not mocked, and what a man sows, that's what he'll reap. And what we do as parents, what we're sowing into our students, the effort that we're putting in, the daily, the scripture that we're encouraging with, those things, then we'll reap one of these days at that moment of adulthood, or when that brain develops the way that it should, then at that moment they'll get it. Maybe they don't right now, but eventually they will.
Right. Okay, let's continue with the coaching. The coach has there's a limitation of what the coach can do. You can do all of the training and preparation to the best of your ability, but it's still up to the player. And what the player does is going to be on the player. I mean, you've done all of your part. As a parent, it's kind of the same way. So I think we need to resist that mindset of they're just going to do whatever they want to do. And try to I think we need to assume that responsibility as parents and say, I'm going to do my part. And then I'm going to, hope and pray that they will do theirs.
Absolutely.
And that they will use what I've given them. The fact is they may not. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't keep the coach from coaching.
That's right.
And that doesn't keep the parent from parenting.
Absolutely.
At the end of the game, I want to know that I did my best.
Right.
I want to know that I prepared them and I gave them every opportunity that I could for them to succeed. At some point, the whistle blows, the game starts, but I want to know at the end of that game that I did my part.
Right.
So that I can't harbor any of the guilt. I know I did my best. I know that I was intentional. I know that everything that we did was for a purpose. And then I challenged them, I encouraged them, and I disciplined them when they needed to be disciplined. But at the same time, I want to know at the end of the game, whether I can or not. I'm not saying it's always perfect, but at the end of the game, I want to know that I did my best.
Right.
So that it was on them.
And without regret. You don't have regret when you know that you've done everything in your power as a coach or a parent. You're going to limit your regret, or at least limit it.
That's right. And two, the players are going to be more successful probably if the parents are present in the stands cheering them on. So that's what we can do in every aspect of their life.
Good point. Thank you all for joining me again.